We returned to Mash smashing Margaret to the ground. His earlier attack had knocked down her newly transformed form. The crowd gasped and Dot cried out in shock, asking if that was really what defeated her. Lance answered grimly, no, it was only a temporary measure. The fight wasn't over yet, and Margaret still had her second spell. The outcome remained uncertain. Margaret admitted Mash was impressive. Then, without warning, she cast her second magic, Sound Second, Death Gong. Mash stared at the new spell, confused. Margaret explained it was a death knell. Anyone who heard it would fall. In 1 minute, the sound would ring out and engulf a 2-kilometer radius. The only way to stop it was for Mash to take her wand. Mash had 1 minute to stop her. His friends tensed. Dot said it was impossible. Lance noted that while Mash was fast, it wasn't enough. Their only advantage was the enclosed arena. If Margaret kept running, Mash couldn't repeat his earlier tricks. Margaret took off. Mash chased, but her speed outmatched his. She danced around him effortlessly, reminding him his efforts were meaningless. 30 seconds left, she called. Then she kept counting, mocking Mash. Dot shouted in panic. Time was almost up. Suddenly, Mash planted his hands into the arena floor. With sheer force, he tore up half the battlefield. A giant slab of stone rose, blocking Margaret's escape route. The crowd realized he'd done it to limit her options. Margaret narrowed her eyes, with her path narrowed to just left or right. She tried to feint right, but Mash was already there. She assumed he'd guessed and tried going left. Mash still intercepted her. She was stunned. Mash had faked her out with a body feint, angling his torso to one side to mislead her before shifting to the other. Tom explained it aloud, basic sports technique. Despite still having room to escape, Margaret insisted Mash couldn't catch her, but it was already too late. Mash caught her. With just his pinky finger, Margaret stared in disbelief. How had he reached her with only that? Mash then snatched her wand and crushed it in his hand. The death gong fizzled out. The host cried out, "The sonic chase is over." Mash had defeated Margaret. The audience roared. With that victory, Mash moved one step closer to becoming a divine visionary. Margaret, still on the ground, laughed. She said Mash had done it all without using any magic, and that fascinated her. She accepted her defeat. Mash just looked at her silently. The atmosphere suddenly shifted. Then a crack tore through the sky. A massive chicken foot emerged from the rift, stunning everyone. Caldo and Mash's friends watched in horror as a monstrous figure stepped out. It was Innocent Zero himself on his dragon. Wahlberg became serious. Mash just stood there. We return to the moment where Innocent Zero makes entrance to the arena on his dragon, stunning everyone. He greets everyone and casts a spell. The air grew heavy. With his spell, time itself seemed to freeze. All around the arena, people, including Mash, were suspended mid-movement, unable to react. Innocent Zero approached Mash, calling him by his full name, and touched his face, calling it beautiful. They said they never imagined seeing Mash alive again, and confessed they had felt sadness when they thought he was gone. Then came the revelation. Innocent Zero called Mash his son. They explained that absorbing Mash would complete them, and with that they prepared to leave. But a voice cried out, "Stop!" It was Wahlberg. Unaffected by the time-freezing magic, he stood firm. Wahlberg declared that he wouldn't let them take Mash. One of Innocent Zero's followers noted Wahlberg didn't seem afraid of dark magic, but said they had prepared for him. Suddenly, a massive attack struck him. Panic erupted, but it was just his instincts screaming to back off. Was this the depth of Wahlberg's wrath? Wahlberg simply chuckled at him. Wahlberg's expression was furious. He told the man that if he was already scared, then he should leave. Worthless creatures didn't belong here. Innocent Zero gently placed a hand on the follower's shoulder and told Wahlberg not to be so cruel to their allies. "It would make us sad," he said softly. Wahlberg asked, what was Innocent Zero's real goal? He answered, to become a perfect human, immortal, beautiful, and powerful. That was all they wanted. Wahlberg's anger deepened. He accused him of causing suffering, stealing magic, murdering innocents, sacrificing countless lives for selfish dreams. Innocent Zero shrugged. He didn't understand the problem. His family existed for him. Mash also existed for him. He would take him home. Wahlberg laughed. Then we are destined to oppose each other, he said, releasing his full power. He declared that Mash would be the hope of the world, and if Innocent Zero wanted him, they'd have to go through him. In response, Innocent Zero said it had been decades since their last clash. Both summoned their divine powers. Wahlberg called on Uranus, god of the sky. Innocent Zero invoked Kronos, god of time. The confrontation between two god-tier mages, Wahlberg and Innocent Zero, intensified. A fierce aura erupted between them. Suddenly, Innocent Zero unleashed a horde of monsters, intending to direct them toward the people below. Wahlberg was stunned. Innocent Zero calmly explained that he didn't need anyone but Mash. He planned to kill everyone else. Wahlberg roared, releasing powerful magic that disrupted the surrounding spell. He selectively gave consciousness to the strong ones. Wahlberg told them he'd explain everything later, but for now, they had to protect the students. Without hesitation, Mash's allies sprang into action. Lance questioned the nature of the creatures. Dot replied he didn't know, only that they were evil. Caldo, recognizing Innocent Zero's presence, stepped in to assist Wahlberg, cleaving through the monsters with his powerful sword. Caldo observed that the creatures were as strong as double liners. Dot asked why there were so many, but Lance simply told him to keep fighting. Together, they unleashed their personal magic to destroy the twisted minions. Innocent Zero noted Wahlberg had left the battlefield to only a handful of people. Wahlberg replied that if he were Innocent Zero, he'd worry more about himself. Then Wahlberg teleported both of them to an empty location to avoid civilian casualties. Back in the arena, Mash's allies struggled. They couldn't even scratch the monsters. Lance encouraged them to hold on. Backup would arrive. Suddenly, he noticed something. Turning around, he saw a giant spiked sphere. Dot shouted in panic, realizing it was about to fall. Selwar revealed himself as the one behind it, startling Dot. Monsters pushed in harder, cornering them. Dot realized that none of the monsters were targeting Mash. It was a trap. Margaret agreed. She expected Innocent Zero had a plan to deal with Mash. Dot was shocked and asked how she knew. She shrugged, calling it woman's intuition. Dot shouted to Mash that they would hold the line. Only Mash could stop Selwar. Mash agreed and ran ahead. Selwar, atop his towering structure of carbon magic, waited. Dot thought that it would take Mash too long to climb, and enemies would attack along the way. But Mash suddenly stepped back and kicked the tower. The bottom crumbled. He kept kicking, collapsing section after section, rapidly lowering the tower. Dot stared in disbelief, wondering if they were playing Daruma Drop. Soon the tower was short enough for Mash to reach Selwar directly. Selwar recalled their first encounter. Mash just stared blankly. It was clear Mash didn't remember him. Mash thought they met at the Easton's entrance ceremony. Selwar seethed in silence. Meanwhile, Dot, Lance, and Margaret continued fighting. The monsters felt endless. Then, Dot saw something, a stroller in the middle of the battlefield. Inside was a baby. Confused, he wondered why a baby was there. Suddenly, the baby cast a spell called Babies, and Dot was transformed into a baby himself. He can now only babble. The baby laughed and revealed itself to be Sitter Baby, a member of the 6 criminal canes. His magic could revert anyone into an infant, stripping them of all experience and strength. Dot screamed in baby talk and fired a spell, only to produce a puff of smoke. Defeated, he cried and crawled away. He knew he was doomed and desperately sought Lance's help. Soon he found him and called out with incomprehensible baby sounds. Lance turned, stared, and scolded Dot for joking around. Dot tried to explain, but Lance couldn't understand a word. Suddenly, another baby spell was cast. Lance dodged while carrying baby Dot, realizing that was the cause of Dot's condition. Annoyed, he said even Dot's baby face was irritating. As monsters jumped at them, Lance used Graveyard to repel the attack, grumbling about having to fight while babysitting. A noise nearby caught their attention. A rattle had fallen. Driven by instinct, Dot crawled toward it with a smile. Lance was shocked and shouted at him, realizing Dot had entered the baby zone. He lost focus. Sitter cast Baby's spell again. This time, Lance was hit and transformed into a baby. Dot shouted while Lance calmed him in baby talk. Though they couldn't understand each other, Dot knew Lance was annoyed. The monster attacked again, forcing them to roll away. Another rattle fell. Without thinking, both crawled toward it, nearly getting crushed. Dot blamed his baby instincts. Lance, meanwhile, needed better self-control. Sitter mocked their helplessness, noting they could now use only a tenth of their magic power. He called it a perfect, one-sided battle. Dot admitted the situation was bad. Sitter ordered the monsters to attack. But suddenly, baby Lance cast sectional gravial, destroying Sitter and his minions in an instant. Sitter was stunned. How could a baby still use such magic? Dot explained that even if Lance's power was reduced, it didn't matter. Lance had simply focused his magic into a smaller area. The caster may have been weak, but the magic itself remained strong. Lance was, after all, the top student of the year. In baby talk, Lance taunted Sitter, declaring the battle truly was one-sided. Dot couldn't understand him. Caldo, watching from afar, remarked how Easton always produced such strange and gifted students. Back at the tower, Selwar trembled with rage. He demanded Mash acknowledge him. But Mash simply looked around blankly, confused. It became clear Mash genuinely had no idea who Selwar was. Selwar stood there, silent, a flicker of disappointment on his face. All the files uploaded by the user have been fully loaded. Searching won't provide additional information. Rio and Neri soared through the skies on their broom. Neri turned to Rio and asked about the relationship between Wahlberg and Innocent Zero. Rio explained that the society they knew was built by an exceptional magic user, the originator of the divine visionary system. That man was Adam, a mage of divine power whose dark magic had never been equaled. Both Wahlberg and Innocent Zero were said to be Adam's most powerful disciples. Neri wondered if that meant their powers were nearly on par. Rio confirmed it. If Innocent Zero had a hidden plan and Wahlberg fell, things would turn dire. He didn't finish the thought. The scene shifted to Wahlberg facing Innocent Zero. The latter greeted him, asking if Wahlberg was as glad to see him as he was. Then, Innocent Zero revealed his face. It was a distorted, Slenderman-like visage. Wahlberg was visibly shaken. Innocent Zero, noticing this reaction, remarked that it seemed Wahlberg viewed him as a monster. He changed his face again and asked if Wahlberg would treat him as a friend if he looked like this instead. Wahlberg replied coldly, Innocent Zero had already abandoned his humanity. Innocent Zero disagreed. He claimed he was more human than anyone, overflowing with desire and greed. That day, he intended to reclaim Mash Burndead and kill Wahlberg. Then cast a forbidden spell, Times the Living Dead. A coffin and a massive clock appeared behind him. Wahlberg was stunned, recognizing the spell as forbidden. Meanwhile, Selwar demanded to know if Mash truly didn't remember him, but in Mash vision, he looked like a cream puff head. The scene zoomed into Selwar's furious eyes. He launched a barrage of carbon magic, but Mash dodged smoothly. At least Mash still remembered how to fight. Selwar taunted him, calling Abyss his cockroach friend who somehow survived. After killing Mash, he planned to hunt Abyss down too. Back on the battlefield, Dot was still fighting monsters. He hoped Mash was holding up, considering Selwar had likely bombarded him with carbon spears. Dot remembered how, in their previous fight, he had reached Selwar with Abel's help. Now, he was on his own. Mash ran over Selwar's carbon magic attacks like it was nothing. Selwar was stunned. He leapt forward and landed a solid hit to Selwar's face. Selwar staggered. He couldn't understand. Mash had struggled before, but now it was as if he saw through all his tricks. Mash, still calm, finally remembered Selwar now. Mash said he had already seen the trick, so he had mastered the rhythm of his attacks. Flashback began, explaining who Adam Jobs was. A once-in-a-century genius with unrivaled magical ability, Adam shaped every aspect of modern magic society, from education to the Magic Bureau. In his later years, he focused on helping those without magic. He founded the belief of noblesse oblige. The strong must serve the weak. He passed this ideal down to 3 disciples, one of whom was Wahlberg. Now Adam himself emerged from the coffin, shocking Wahlberg. Innocent Zero revealed that he had obtained the magic to resurrect flesh. Adam's body was back, but his mind was gone. At that moment, Necromancer appeared, claiming he'd take over from here. He assured that Wahlberg wouldn't be able to tell the difference between Puppet Adam and the real one. Wahlberg asked how far they were willing to go to provoke him. Magic erupted around Wahlberg as he unleashed his full power. Innocent Zero taunted him further. Adam had once aged and weakened, but now his body had been restored to its prime. His magic power was overwhelming. As the puppet approached, Wahlberg remembered his final conversation with his master. He had once challenged Adam's philosophy, questioning if self-sacrifice truly served a purpose. Adam teased him and called him a fool, but reassured him, saying Wahlberg was strong and would one day surpass him. Back in the present, Wahlberg crushed the puppet with raw magical force. Innocent Zero was stunned. Wahlberg declared that while Adam had been the greatest, he now lived in the present, and that meant not showing mercy. He declared that he is now the strongest. Elsewhere, the fight between Mash and Cell War raged on. Mash suddenly asked why he was being targeted. Cell War explained the concept of verbating magic, a form of dark magic that uses 6 hearts from one's own relatives to create an immortal core. Her father had raised 6 children for this very purpose. Mash had been born to be the perfect body. Mash was shocked. So he existed purely for his organs? Cell War told him to be honored. He would become part of a godlike being. Mash stared, confused, and asked if that meant he was like protein for muscles. The question left Cell War speechless. Mash sighed, crushed by the revelation. He declared the burden too heavy to carry. Mash then just lay down and fell asleep. Cell War angrily woke him up. Mash then asked if they were brothers. Cell War replied that he was just a clone, created with their father's blood and a corpse. He was meant to be part of the ultimate body. But their father had chosen someone worthless like Mash. He couldn't accept it. As Cell War ranted, Mash punched him in the face mid-sentence. Cell War fell. Mash said it didn't matter if his life had meaning or not. He would live on his own terms. Mash further said if Cell War wanted a fight, he could bring everything he had. Cell War stood up, bloodied. If that was how Mash wanted it, then fine. He summoned Phaestus, the god of iron. Cell War summoned Hephaestus, the god of iron, leaving Mash asking what it was. Cell War explained it was the true form of his wand, its full power. Mash seemed to understand. Cell War said magic evolved in countless ways depending on its user. Then he immediately attacked Mash with Diamond Cutter. Mash barely dodged and admitted it was a close call. The attack struck both the arena and the school, which annoyed Mash. Cell War explained those blade discs were tipped with diamond and could cut through anything. He kept launching attacks, stating they'd slice Mash into pieces. Discs continuously returned, but Mash managed to dodge. He considered ignoring them and going for Cell War directly. He nearly got sliced in half. His clothes tore as he kept dodging. Mash observed that Cell War has 4 diamond discs. That means he's holding back. If he releases all 4 discs, it would be impossible to get close. This was bad. In the sky, he summoned a massive spiked object called the Black Diamond. Mash muttered that Cell War sure is full of tricks. Cell War explained that high-level wands, like Hephaestus, didn't just enhance power. The amount of magic you could unleash with them was unmatched. The thousands of diamond shards in the air would pierce everyone nearby. While dodging, Mash turned his back, confusing Cell War. A moment later, Mash took off running. Cell War was stunned. Why was Mash fleeing? Had he abandoned the students? Maybe he was scared and had given up. Then, unexpectedly, Mash reappeared right behind him, like something out of a horror film. He explained that he had sprinted around the entire school to outrun the diamond discs. Cell War couldn't believe it. Just how fast had he run? He realized Mash was tightening his grip. Cell War, unfazed, said Mash had forgotten one thing. His skin turned to diamond, making him invulnerable. No attack could break it, while he could still cut through Mash. He guided the discs to hit them both, confident he'd survive, while Mash would be killed. The disc struck Mash's back and blood splattered. He collapsed. Laughing, Cell War stepped on his head, saying, Mash wasn't that strong after all, just a waste. He announced he would kill Mash's friends next.
Then he noticed something under his foot, a cream puff. He stared, confused. Mash stood up, holding a tray of cream puffs, and said, Cream Puff Party had begun. Cell War was utterly baffled. How had Mash survived? He couldn't comprehend it as Mash kept shoving cream puffs into his mouth. Eventually, Cell War started choking. Mash got him in a headlock. An explanation followed. If the brain receives insufficient oxygen, hypoxia occurs, causing hallucinations. Mash hadn't tried punching the diamond. It was too difficult to time. Instead, he used a chokehold. With his massive biceps, he cut off oxygen to Cell War's carotid artery and knocked him out within a second. As Cell War collapsed, his massive black diamond shattered. Mash stood up and explained the school was important to him. If anyone wanted to destroy it, they'd have to be ready to be choked unconscious. The scene shifted back to the fight between Wahlberg and Innocent Zero. Necros, who was also present, explained that Wahlberg Baigan was a former divine visionary who brought order to the world and still led it as the strongest magic user. His power defined the current world's balance, but only this superficial world. Necros then had Adam cast Dark Impact, a powerful spell that could pierce a mountain. Wahlberg narrowly dodged. Necros explained that Adam's dark magic could engulf everything in void. He launched Dark Snake, and though Wahlberg evaded again, his clothes were grazed and torn. Necros explained that Adam's magic could disintegrate anything it touched, even other spells. Dark magic, he said, could not be repelled by any other form of magic. It was his new toy, and Adam, under his control, was his most beautiful puppet. He cast Dark Snake Double, expecting Wahlberg to be struck. But Wahlberg repelled it. Necros was stunned. Wahlberg then created a sphere and sharp objects that surrounded Necros, slashing his body into pieces. Panicked, Necros heard Wahlberg explain that his magic controlled space. He had simply moved Necros' body parts elsewhere. He wouldn't die. Necros realized this was how Wahlberg had neutralized his dark magic, by removing it from space entirely. Necros cast Dark Impact Absolute and thought even Wahlberg couldn't counter it. But Wahlberg erased the attack effortlessly. Necros couldn't believe it. Necros tried Dark Tremendos, a max-level spell, confident that it couldn't lose to anything. Wahlberg noted the mistake. Necros thought he had already cast a spell. Until now, Wahlberg had only been using his wand's abilities. If Necros wanted to see him cast magic, he should watch. Extraordinary power enveloped the area. Wahlberg finally chanted his spell, Pace Sacrifice. His magic swallowed the battlefield, utterly disregarding Necros' most powerful attack. Innocent Zero watched and quietly remarked that Wahlberg still wasn't weakening. We return to the battle between Wahlberg and Innocent Zero. This time, it's Innocent Zero facing Wahlberg directly. He attacked with Time's Cold. But Wahlberg instantly countered with warping himself behind Innocent Zero. However, Innocent Zero suddenly appeared behind Wahlberg instead. Was he manipulating time? Innocent Zero cast Time's Rewound and struck Wahlberg, causing half of his body to wither. Wahlberg was stunned. Innocent Zero then threatened to target his legs next. Wahlberg realized Innocent Zero was exploiting small openings while casting high-level time magic frequently. Wahlberg became serious. He tried severing the space around him again with spaces about, but it wasn't enough. He had to cut space more precisely to disrupt the time-based attacks. After slicing space repeatedly, he finally halted the assault, until Innocent Zero appeared behind him again. Innocent Zero smirked, saying Wahlberg would need to do more than that to defeat him. He cast Time's Rewound once more. Wahlberg couldn't track when he dodged. Suddenly, his left hand vanished. Reeling from the pain, Wahlberg heard Innocent Zero declare the gap between their powers had grown too wide. He prioritized his ambition and had no interest in self-sacrifice. In contrast, Wahlberg had always put others before himself, a weakness Innocent Zero claimed. Wahlberg recalled his past, a sickly child with poor grades, lacking confidence, and skipping school. Isolated and pessimistic, he avoided others out of fear. Then came Adam, his master, someone who visited him regardless of rejection, weather, or mood, sharing trivia and warmth. When Wahlberg asked why, Adam simply said, "I just couldn't leave you alone." That kindness saved him. Back in the present, Wahlberg told Innocent Zero to live for himself if that's what he wanted. but Wahlberg lived because others had saved him. He couldn't ignore the weak. And now, he was ready to unleash his ultimate magic, even if it cost his life. Innocent Zero noted that even among thirds, the peak of magic wielders, it was rare to reach such power. Wahlberg invoked Space's thirds, Uranus inclination, calling upon the god within his wand. Innocent Zero recognized it, a spell that could erase everything in a given space, impossible to dodge. Wahlberg was prepared to die to protect the world and his students, just like his master once did. The sphere of Uranus began spinning violently, radiating brilliant light. In response, Innocent Zero froze time with time's unmove and struck Wahlberg's body. The wounds were fatal. But Uranus inclination kept activating. Innocent Zero was baffled. Wahlberg, nearly dead, explained, "A third spell taps into the true power of a wand. If enough magic is poured into it, the wand will continue the spell even after the caster dies." Innocent Zero realized Wahlberg was serious. He intended to sacrifice himself from the beginning. Wahlberg said his mission wasn't complete. He believed in a world where people respected and accepted each other's weaknesses. He would lead his students by example, as Adam once did. As Uranus inclination exploded, it engulfed the entire battlefield. Then everything returned to normal. Innocent Zero was unscathed. Wahlberg blinked in disbelief. Innocent Zero had reversed time. Brutal attacks rained down on Wahlberg, tearing holes in his body. Innocent Zero held him by the head, mocking him. Wahlberg was strong, but Innocent Zero, who lived only for himself, claimed he'd always be stronger. Wahlberg, bleeding and fading, lamented the cruelty of fate. Were Adam's ideals so fragile that they could be shattered by one selfish man? Innocent Zero raised a blade to finish him. But suddenly, Mash appeared, kneeing Innocent Zero straight in the face. Mash reminded Wahlberg of the moment when he was asked what he would to do, overwhelmingly powerful bad guys. Mash simply replied he would beat the stuffings out of them with his bare fists, giving us a badass pose.